Welcome to History and Lowell. This is our first official episode of 2021. I am your host, Maritza Grooms. I'm here with, I should say, my personal professor, Bob Forrant. And we've got quite the array of guests for you today. We've got Hannah Tello, Community Health Data Manager from the Greater Lowell Health Alliance. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
And we've got Lianna Kushi from E for All, Entrepreneurship for All, Lowell Lawrence. Welcome, Lianna.
Hello.
And we have, last but definitely not least, Emma Tobin of the International Institute of New England. Welcome, Emma.
Maritza.
Awesome. You have all been guests on our show before, and that's why we wanted to have you back for this special edition of History in Lowell. 2020 was quite a year. I think we can all agree on that. And I think I don't know if you guys are with me, but I'm quite happy to put it behind us. But one thing I like to do with the turn of the year, I always like to reflect on how that year went and my hopes for the new year. And I think Bob had a really great idea in trying to do that from a different vantage point, right, with all of you today. So let's start. What's a takeaway, one takeaway from the past year's events? We had so much happen last year, from fires. The earth was on fire. We had all kinds of uprisings, and of course, a pandemic that shut the entire world down. Wow. And, crazy political things going on. And I think 2021 is trying to compete with 2020 maybe in some ways. But yes, so let's start. One takeaway, if you can, just one takeaway.
So it's a great and really hard question. I think if I had to choose one takeaway, it's not a new realization, but I think if there's anyone who needed illustration of systemic racism and institutionalized racism and needed to understand all of the very many ways that plays out in the United States, then 2020 is kind of like a very terrifying illustration of those. And we have just seen it in health disparities, we've seen it in policing, we've seen it in the treatment of people expressing their opinion and their political opinion. It's everywhere you look, and that's my main takeaway from 2020. But if I'm allowed to add a little half takeaway, I will also say that I'm also very struck by the generosity of the community that I'm a part of and the ways that they have attempted to support each other throughout everything that has happened. So they're not equal. One doesn't cancel out the other, but those are my takeaways.
Oh, for sure. Yes, there's the mutual exclusivity, right? You're going to have terrible things always, but the power of community prevails. And that's one thing I think I hold on to always, but especially during trying times like this. Thank you, Emma. Yes, awesome. All right, let's go with Lianna.
All right, so I've been thinking about this and, felt a lot of pressure to say something that was going to be insightful and include everything that I ever wanted to say about this past year. And that was way too much pressure on myself. So I decided, to just share personally what my takeaway was from last year. And so I'd say personally, I'm going to say it's broad, so I include something more than one thing, but I would say it's standing up for myself in small ways and big ways. So, and having the courage to do that. So if there is something that I don't feel something makes me uncomfortable, or I see something that I don't think is right, bringing it up right away. And I don't think that before 2020, I let a lot of things just go by. Even because I'd make justifications in my head for them, or they felt small and not important to bring up. So I think I've done that for myself in the workplace. I've done that for myself in my relationships. From everything from being more direct about what my needs are so I can take care of myself and then take care of others better. But then also, what I'm observing and seeing for myself or others in the workplace, and being a self-advocate and a fellow advocate. So even though I've always thought of myself in that way, I think I realized I can always do better and I can always speak up more, and really in the small ways, right? So as much as, it is going out and being present at a rally, I think it's these intimate connections and conversations that we have, and the relationships we build with each other, and little things can break trust over time. And I think that had happened for myself with people, and rebuilding that has been so challenging. And some conversations haven't been the way I would have wanted. And then some have been so surprising and been wonderful and brought me closer to people. So that's my takeaway.
Oh, that is awesome. That's so important though, right? We're looking at all of these big, big systems and all of these huge ways that we're all impacted as people and as communities, but on a very on that scale, that is so important. And you guys are like making me even reassess the way that I'm thinking about my reflections of the past year, because all of those things that you said, yeah, I want to be more intentional like you, Lianna. That's
Me
awesome.
too.
Thank you. And of course, Hannah, what's going on, Hannah? What's your takeaway from 2020?
Well, it's been a year. I think that the first thing I thought about reflecting on 2020 was just in an effort to be very transparent and authentic. I think it was a really heartbreaking year. We suffered individual losses. I think very few people escaped that. We suffered community losses. And then we have sort of this global shared loss. And those things are genuinely heartbreaking. And I'm so curious about what our sort of inability to really engage in shared grief is going to look like as we start to sort of climb out of this year. But that's not an especially satisfying takeaway, because what do we do with that? We don't really know yet what to do with that. So as I was thinking about it more, I think that the takeaway really was that I think part of the heartbreak for me was the failure of leadership, or even harmful leadership through all of these different things that we've moved through. And I think my takeaway is really this sort of, at times sobering, but also really energizing realization that leadership is a sacred task, that being a leader, being trusted as a leader, is something that comes with immense potential for unimaginable good, as we saw over the summer, and the power of communities to identify and rally around local leadership, the value of diverse voices in leadership. But it also has the immense potential to cause great harm, which we also saw. And I think that it allowed me to reflect on where it made sense for me to be a leader and where it made sense for me to step aside and let a much more fitting leader step up. And I think that that is a lesson that I really hope to continue moving forward, because high quality leadership can be the facilitator of heartbreak or a barrier to it. And we need to make sure that we're letting the right leaders lead and giving them the resources that they need to do it. And that's really the takeaway that I'm leaving 2020 with.
Yes. Woo, you guys. Woo. Yes, way to kick it off. Way to kick it off. This is why we invited you three back for this episode. And Hannah, I think things, you know, in our past lives as youth workers, and when we would do our group agreements, the step up, step down. And I think very much of that in terms of leadership. And I know it sounds like such a simple thing, you know, step forward if you have something to say. And it harkens back to what you were saying too, Lianna, about advocating for yourself, but then also stepping back and really actively listening to people, to your community, to even to the people who think they have the answers, right? It's a lot. You all, wow, yes, great points everyone has made. Bob, do you want to say anything?
I'm going to be really brief, and I can't echo as eloquently as the three of you in terms of what you've already said. So I'm going to think about this more as the history teacher. And the year has shown me how little we actually know about our own history, and how that comes back around to bite us, and how not understanding the history of segregation, the failures of Reconstruction after the Civil War, not fully grasping as a society the systemic racism that other people have already mentioned, has led us into this real serious moment, I think, in the country's history, and that's amplified by what happened last week. I was struck by how many white members of the Democratic Party were shocked that some white people came and invaded their space. When white people have invaded the spaces of people of color in America since the early 1600s. And all of a sudden now, because this happened to Nancy Pelosi, she's all freaked out and has to do something about it. Now, I'm not minimizing what happened last week, but a little bit of perspective and a little bit of understanding would really go a long way. And so I think that not understanding that allowed for the entirety of the year, my takeaway is that white people did not stand up enough, myself included, to the structural racism, to the endemic racism, and to the just violently expressed day-to-day racism in the country. And so the general result of that was what we got last Wednesday, which should not have been a surprise to anybody. And so I think that I'll stop right there.
I think that was a great way to wrap up and sum up everything that everyone's saying. And for me, I would say just the humanity of it all, of everything that all of you are saying. It's so easy to think of these things as just separate from you when you're not thinking about yourself as a human or other people as human. And I think my whole thing for 2021 is I am just pleading, please see the humanity in other people. One of my sister's dad always says, OPE, other people exist. Imagine if we all could just have a moment and really think about that and think about our role in that, right? You know, how can we be better humans to each other? That's my question for 2021 for myself and for my community and for anybody else who would like to be better. How can you be better for yourself and be better for each other, so that we can actually start to, well, I guess we have to address it before we can start to heal, huh? So I know I'm saying all of this with a big smile on my face, but this is how I cope.
Don't worry, I'm with you, Maritza. I do the same thing.
Absolutely. And that's what we have to do sometimes. You know, we all have different ways. And I think Hannah made a really great point about grieving. You know, we all have different ways that we grieve. Some of us aren't even like there to be able to acknowledge the grief that we need to feel and express. You know, and like Emma was saying, like I always bring it back to community. I know in 2020, community carried me. I would not have made it without community, 100%. And all of you here are a big part of my community. So thank you all for helping me through 2020. I appreciate you. And now here we are in 2021. And as Bob said, things are happening that nobody should be shocked by. not one person should be shocked. I know, I think a lot of people thought I was joking last year when I said, oh yeah, this is going to happen. And then when it happened, I was on vacation and I said, well, you know, I'm just going to continue to rest. as a Black person in America, as a Black woman in America, I am tired of shouting. I'm tired. And you know, hopefully white supremacy will implode on itself, but I know that's not going to be without some serious ramifications for the rest of us. So going into 2021, you know, what is something that we're all hoping for, or one thing that you specifically are hoping for as an individual, or maybe as a representative of a community, or maybe as a representative of your organization, or just as a Lowell resident, or you know, a Lowell community member, because I know we're not all Lowell residents currently, but Lowell's in all of our hearts. What's a thing that, you know, you hope for 2021, or maybe you would have, if you had a chance to have that meeting with the president-elect, I'll say Biden, or our first woman, South Asian, Black vice president, Kamala Harris, or maybe even Governor Baker. I know what we would say to the Lowell City Council. We've already had those conversations. So 2021, and we'll go in reverse order here. Bob, I'm going to have you last again because you're my co-host. So we'll go Hannah. What is your hope for 2021 that we can get done?
So I piloted these questions with my son because I was curious what he thought. And I was really impressed. He's 9. And his answer to this was he wanted everyone to get the vaccine. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to try to be that specific, because my first initial thought was obviously, oh, I hope we, I don't know, restore democracy or, you know, make science real again. These sort of like abstract.
I like that one. That's a good bumper sticker.
These sort of paradigmatic approaches. And I said, what if we got really specific? So if I genuinely could influence policy, like meaningful policy at a high level for 2021, I would at least like to start the conversation about universal basic income. Genuinely. I have been, as you know, involved as a public health leader through the pandemic. And I can't tell you how damaged people's health is by the added stress of our economy, by the added burden of having to work, the amount of students who have not even checked into their classrooms because they had to go to work to support their families, or their income earner in their household died from COVID. I mean, these are profound, there's a profound impact of poverty on people's health and well-being. And it sounds really radical. I get it. It's you know, but if there's ever a time where we are at least poised to start the conversation about what would life look like, how much healthier and happier would we be as a community if we just had a little bit of help? Everybody gets the same, a little bit of help. If this isn't the time, then I really can't imagine.
Yeah, then when would it be?
I really can't imagine that there'd be a better time. So that's my big ask. If not, I'm just happy if they restore $3 billion in funding to the NIH. So there's my big cookie and there's my little ask. That's how I'd frame it.
Yes.
I'm just, if it's all right, Maritza, I'm going to jump right in after Hannah, because ditto for that. And then what I'll add to it is funding for businesses to, you know, survive and to start more business start, specifically for women and women of color, because in December, the job loss was 100% women lost their jobs. All of the jobs lost were women. Women and women of color have been the most impacted by this pandemic in terms of jobs and economic opportunities. And we need to, of course, save many of the businesses through whether it's, you know, payroll protection program or loans or, you know, let's just do grants, please. I mean, that's a big thing that's happening on the state level is more grant money. But, you know, one thing is we had all the state grant funding and 10,000 businesses applied and only 1,000 got funding. So in terms of the need, it's just huge. But we also need to think about building businesses for the future, because this has changed the world forever, this pandemic, and our economy will never be the same. It's going to be a different economy. So we need different businesses and different jobs where people can survive and thrive. So ditto on Hannah's, and then money directly in the hands of women of color. So through UBI, but then also to start businesses too.
Yeah, so this is another incredibly hard question because I started wanting to list everything, but I think that this is one area in which the Trump administration has actually made this very easy for us, because they have spent the last 4 years systematically dismantling the immigration system that was in place, and it wasn't a very good one, but they took away so many pathways to entering this country, remaining in this country, accessing whatever limited public benefits or supports existed for immigrants in this country. And so what I would ask of the incoming administration is to, at a minimum, put those things back and then keep going. It's not, you know, I think if we look at everything that's happened during the pandemic, you know, immigrants make up such an enormous part of the essential workers in this country, the frontline workers, the people who have kept the things moving that need to keep moving. Now is a moment to say, hey, thanks for doing that. You know, why don't you also be a citizen? Why don't you also have access to public benefits? Why don't, here's healthcare, and actually your family could join you too. So that is the thing that I would like to see happen. I obviously hope that that includes a reinstatement of the U.S. refugee admissions program, which has been, you know, crushed under the Trump administration. I very much hope to see us welcoming upwards of 100,000 refugees into the United States every year, as we so easily could be doing. Not easily, it's incredibly hard work, but as we could be doing and should be doing.
Right, and it's more than a banner, right? You see these banners that are thanking our frontline workers. You know, all of these things would be way more of a substantial thank you to every single person, right? That all of you who have talked about, every single community. And once again, see, that's my hope. All of you have listed things about treating humans like humans, right? Just
figure.
Just imagine. Oh.
Radical concept.
And it really does seem like such a radical concept these days to treat humans as though, you know, they're humans who have basic needs. You know, I would throw in healthcare for everybody on top of everything that you all said. Bob, how about you? What's your hope for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I like the way Hannah started by saying, if not now, when? And again, sort of the history teacher in me, at the start of Roosevelt's administration in 1933, the country was a wreck, and you could make an argument that it was about as wrecked as this one is, for different reasons, but wrecked. Distrust, high unemployment, staggering health problems, and no social safety net even in place to begin to pick up the pieces. And within 100 days, there was a response. And so I think for me, if I could get to Governor Baker, even though he's bigger than me, I would want to like pick him up by his suit lapels, shake him up and down and say, dude, wake up. You're so freaking lethargic. You're so passive. Wake up. We're in crisis. And I would want to say the same to Joe Biden. I feel like Kamala Harris has the energy, and hopefully she gets a lot of things put on her plate, because I feel like she's going to have the energy to move. But I feel like I watched yesterday Nancy Pelosi being interviewed, and I'm up there in age myself, but I feel they went through this thing about how everybody that runs the House and the Senate is in their 80s. And I'm thinking that's partly what's freaking wrong. You've got no connection to the reality on the ground. And so when I see a photo in the newspaper, like of miles and miles of people waiting to have a Q-tip shoved up their nose or their trunk open to get some food, and I think, how come we've not, as a nation, moved, right? My hope would be that come January 20, somebody within the new administration actually says, hello, this is a crisis, because I don't feel like people have fully grasped that yet. They have rhetorically, but they haven't in reality. And it's just really like, I can't watch the news anymore because I just feel like people are yapping, but there's nobody talking about what to do and how important and urgent it is. And so I love the image of me shaking Governor Baker, because he's way bigger than me and taller than me, and I would not be able to get him off the ground, but I wish I could. And just shake him up and say, dude, come on, one day mess your hair up a little bit and like act like you're angry, because we're in a mess here.
Yeah. 2021, if not now, then when? This is the time. You know, this is the time for radical change. We have been radically uprooted from everything that we know. Everything is different. And there is no reason why we cannot sit and imagine. This is an opportunity to actually sit and think about, what can we do to make our entire world better for everybody, not just my political party versus yours, not just, you know, for everybody. And imagine when you help the people who have the least, guess what? We all win. We all win when you help the people who have the least. And this was so good. And I kind of wish that this was longer than a half hour, because I want to hear more from everybody. And I know you all have such so much more to say on this. And I love your brains. I love your hearts. I love who you are as people. And I'm so grateful that you're part of my community and that you're part of the organizations that you're a part of, because I believe that change does start with us as individuals. And it starts with these kinds of conversations. And I know that we're all having these conversations, and I know that we're having them in our spaces and in our circles. And you all just gave me a whole lot more hope than I was feeling for 2021. And in a realistic perspective, I think that we all need. Wow. So we're already at the mark there. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for doing what you do. Hannah, Lianna, Emma, and of course, my buddy Bob. And thank you all for tuning in.